Well, good evening. This is going to be a video about Dylan Avery. He was interviewed by Associated Press on November 2007. Let's see what he has to say, shall we?
Did you
Let's
think
see
that
here.
immediately or grew over a period of time?
I think subconsciously on the day of 9/11, I had my own doubts. I certainly didn't acknowledge them or express them. And again, I feel it was something that was very subconscious because it wasn't until mid 2002 when I started working on the movie, Loose Change, the movie, the feature film that was supposed to be.
For those who don't know, Dylan Avery is co-producer of the infamous 9/11 conspiracy film Loose Change, which is the most popular 9/11 film in the world, unfortunately, even to this very day.
It was when I started working on that in mid 2002 when I really started to look into 9/11, really started to notice the details, saw a lot of problems, at least problems that I saw with the official story. And it wasn't just me. There were many people who had come before me, even in mid 2002, who had already expressed these kind of opinions. There were people who were saying it since that day, certainly not as loudly as they are now, but people definitely had their suspicions.
And what was it that seemed suspicious to you? What were the details that struck you?
I'm almost positive the first thing that struck me as suspicious was the collapse of the Twin Towers, because that's the first thing I explicitly remember researching. That's the first thing that leapt out to me. I did get to see the attacks that day. I did get to watch the whole thing. Me and my friend Sandy were kind of in and out of the room, so I don't exactly remember what we saw and what we didn't. It was a very crazy morning, as it was for everyone else, and I had to take off for school at 10:30, give or take. So I might have actually left for class before the North Tower collapsed. I mean, if I went back and figured out what time my class was, I could probably get a more definitive timeline. But the towers was definitely the first thing that leapt out to me. There's obviously far more. There's far more subjects related to 9/11 that are suspicious, but the Twin Towers was definitely the first and most obvious subject of research for me.
And what was your, just to ask, what were your sort of attitudes towards the politics of the time in 2001, the Bush administration, the people in power?
I followed the election fraud. That was a big thing for me. I was following that. I guess I have to thank President Bush, and I have to thank the Bush administration, because if it wasn't for the outlandish moves that they've done and the total evisceration of the United States Constitution, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be in politics today. I probably still wouldn't care about what goes on around me. So I have them to thank for that. But apart from that, the definitely the first thing that I started following politically was the election and the numerous controversies surrounding that. I remember getting coffee in the coffee shop and the seeing the story unfold in the paper. Like I'd go in one morning, get coffee, see what was going on, go in the next day, see that they were trying to overturn it, but it wasn't working, and that there was this other person who was fighting it. So that was definitely the first thing that leapt out to me. So I had my suspicions about the Bush administration before 9/11 even came around. Certainly not as suspicious as I am of them now, but I knew something was wrong. I could tell that there was something fishy going on.
The inevitable question, though, is why? Why would people in power in your country perpetrate such a horrific? Why would they do that?
Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't they? Is really the best answer that I could. It's the best answer to sum up everything, because in reality, look what the Bush administration has gained because of 9/11. They've been able to use 9/11 as a pretext for virtually everything they've done since that day.
I mean, if you have to, let me ask you something. If you're a reporter, you have to ask that question. You must realize that either one, you're ignorant about previous history, or two, you're just, trying to see whether or not Dylan Avery is um, going to respond in kind with a educated response, but he will. And this is it's not a pat on his back because he made a very terrible film. Nevertheless, he's going to be right here. And I could use the previous 100 years as a testament to the crimes of the federal government, and didn't need 9/11. 9/11 just exasperated the history of the terrible um, history of the Department of State and Pentagon and affluent donors that participated or influenced conflicts uh, in which most of them were precipitated by the government.
Obviously, the invasions of Afghanistan, Iraq, the Patriot Act, Department of Homeland Security, the Military Commissions Act. They've abolished habeas corpus, which means that you have the right to face your accuser. This all stems from the war on terrorism, which is grounded solely on the events of 9/11. It's not like they got up one day and said, well, we had Oklahoma City and we had 1993. That day, the day of 9/11, there were politicians, military figureheads, all kinds of people getting up on television, already telling people that day that your civil liberties are about to be taken away. We're going to have to increase surveillance. We're going to have to do this. We're going to have to start a global campaign against terrorism. Some people even use the phrase war on terrorism that day. When it comes to responsibility, I certainly don't place the blame on President Bush. I certainly don't think Bush did 9/11, as some people might say or believe. I also don't think that the Bush administration alone was responsible for it. I do believe that if there were two people in the Bush administration that we could bring into a courtroom and actually, subpoena and ask them about 9/11, it would be Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld.
Well,
Dick Cheney because he was in the POC, the Presidential Emergency Operations Command, the bunker underneath the White House. He was there the whole morning. He was there before the Pentagon was even struck. This is confirmed by him. This is confirmed by Norman Mineta. This is even confirmed by photographs that were taken that morning. Cheney was in the bunker before the Pentagon was even struck. And the Secretary of Transportation, Norman Mineta, when he was testifying to the 9/11 Commission.
Dylan Avery and the Loose Change crew are the Alex Jonesite light crew, where you just blame Bush, the Bush administration. They don't have much in the way of say regarding the Saudis, which I think a couple of these guys basically think they're patsies. The Israeli issue, they will never touch. These guys won't touch Israel with a 10-foot pole, and they got a lot of flack for it too. But yeah, it's Bush administration, Illuminati, New World Order. That's what these guys are about, and that's basically it. I wish 9/11 was as simple as they made it out to be.
2004 was recollecting his events, or was recollecting his actions on that day. And he went through the timeline about how he heard of the first plane. He left his offices, headed down towards the White House. The second plane had struck, got there, got into the basement. Says that when he got into the basement, Dick Cheney was there, and in an extended interview that he did in 2006 with an activist group in Seattle, We Are Change, he confirmed to them that Lynn Cheney was there as well. So when Norman Mineta arrived at the POC at approximately 9:20 or 9:25, this is according to him, Dick Cheney and Lynn Cheney were already there. So the first tower had been struck, the second tower had been struck, and a third plane was on its way to Washington, D.C. Norman Mineta's exact words go as follows. During the time that the airplane was coming into the Pentagon, there was a young man who would come in and say to the vice president, the plane is 50 miles out, the plane is 30 miles out, and when it got to the plane is 10 miles out.
The man that he's referring to is Douglas Cochran, who was a naval aide inside the Pentagon, who was informing Dick Cheney about an incoming plane. And according to Loose Change, this is a bad conundrum for them. Why? They don't believe a plane crashed into the Pentagon. So why are you taking Mineta's word here as gospel? Poses a problem for you, doesn't it, Dylan? This is the reason why you're no longer active in the 9/11 Truth Movement, is because you've been hounded even by their own truth movement as saying you are too liberal on the subject. And not to mention that, after 3 revisions, you couldn't even get anything right after the 3rd revision. But you certainly made slight improvements as compared to the first film. Doesn't help you when Alex Jones is involved.
The young man also said to the vice president, "Do the orders still stand?" And the vice president turned, whipped his neck around, and said, "Of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?" Now, if the orders that Mr. Mineta and Mr. Cheney and the young Abe were referring to, if those orders were to intercept and shoot down Flight 77, it would have happened. Because if the orders were to shoot it down when it was 50 miles out, it would have been shot down. There's almost no question about it. 50 miles is more than enough time to get something up in the air. I mean, they had military aircraft flying all over that morning. They don't want to talk about some of them, like the E-4B Doomsday plane, but there were planes up in the air that could have intercepted at 50 miles out. If the orders were...
Not necessarily. There wasn't anybody from Andrews. There wasn't anybody from Otis that could have intercepted that plane in time. The conspiracy is that it was in the air 30 minutes prior. It was known to be in the air and to be a potential hijack. 30 minutes. It was announced on the national TV. That's the real conspiracy. Not this no plane garbage.
Not to shoot it down and to allow it to strike the Pentagon, that to me seems like a much more credible explanation, because honestly, if someone had told you there's a plane heading towards Washington and we need you to shoot it down, if someone had said to you the orders are to shoot it down, you wouldn't respond with incredulity the way is it incredulity? Is that how you put it? Incredulity. Yeah. You wouldn't respond with skepticism the way the young Abe did, because he was clearly concerned about what those orders meant. You know, it's 50 miles out, it's 30 miles out, it's 10 miles out, you know, do the orders still stand? He didn't seem like he was recounting orders that said shoot the plane down. All of that notwithstanding, why would they do this? And again, why wouldn't they do this? Look at everything they have to gain. Our civil liberties have been eradicated over in the States. I mean, we're inching slowly towards a police state. It's happening very gradually. It's very akin to the analogy, if you turn you put a frog in a pot of boiling water, if you turn it up slowly, the frog won't jump out. That's pretty much where we are at this point. We're the frog in the pot of water. The heat is being turned up very slowly on us, and a lot of people either aren't noticing or do notice and are apathetic. Or even worse, they do notice and feel that it's fully justified by the events of 9/11. You'd be surprised how often it comes up in conversation over there. Oh, well, we had.
Oh, I think it's much worse than that. I don't think people care. How many times have you heard, this is all too big for me, what can I do? Not realizing that the power resides in the individual, and that if enough individuals come together as a singular unit, that's where your power comes from. Jim Morrison penned a song called 5 to 1. And one of the lyrics is, they got the guns, but we got the numbers. And what does that mean? Well, it means that we're outgunned, but we got the numbers on our side. And they can't just kill us all. And this is the reason why they go to these great lengths in keeping you divided through the catchisms, sexism, racism, politics, religion, anything to get you away from each other. So the future is much bleaker than what Dylan Avery sees in 2007, because 15 years ago, it was a lot better than what it is now in terms of hegemony. And if we don't get our heads on straight, we're going to end up destroying ourselves by our own hand. And the only winner here is the affluent powers who want to keep controlling every aspect of our lives.
Do that because of 9/11. We had to do this because of 9/11. We had to tase this kid in this college, you know, because he could have been a terrorist. We had to, well, oh man, there's so many examples of things happening in the United States that simply couldn't have happened without 9/11 as a pretext.
There's so many points you make there, you know, obviously.
Everything that happened on 9/11 could have happened in 1993. Not everything, but most of the guys. You think the Patriot Act was made overnight? That thing was written by lawyers many years prior. The only thing that was missing was the Project for New American Century guideline, which is a think tank for dual Israeli citizens and neoconservatives like Douglas Feit, and Richard Pearl, and Paul Wolfowitz, and Robert Kagan. And they tried to basically get Clinton into a war with Iraq in 1999. And Clinton didn't budge. They even wrote him a letter. It was actually an article in the Weekly Standard, which is a neoconservative paper written by William Kristol about a potential war with Iran and Iraq and how they see him as a threat in the region. And Clinton didn't budge. What happened? Monica Lewinsky scandal. That's what happened to him. You know, there's a lot that happened in the 90s, and these guys basically don't touch it. 1993 World Trade Center bombing, they don't touch it. Pachinko plot, they don't even know about it. 1998 East Africa bombings, I barely even heard them even mentioning it. Millennium plot, 1999, late 99, I barely hear anything. How about the NSA wiretaps of bin Laden satellite bomb and the house in Yemen? These guys don't even know what that is. There's a lot missing here. And, you know, that's my problem with people like Dylan Avery and others, that because they don't mention any of this. This is all lead up to 9/11. 9/11 would never have happened if any of these incidents don't happen either.
Obviously, it's really fascinating. No, there's so many points there, but I mean, as you know, I haven't seen the whole film, but haven't Al Qaeda virtually admitted responsibility for the attack? So they were proud of it. Where's your thinking on that?
I don't doubt that Al Qaeda was involved to a degree, and I certainly don't feel that Osama bin Laden had absolutely nothing to do with it. These hijackers did exist; they absolutely existed.
I wonder if that got them into a lot of trouble in 2007 for saying that, because that was the height of the truth movement. 2007 to what? 2014? Let's say 7-year window. Yeah. Oh, the no planers were, you know, in their prime right around that time. And to hear Dylan Avery say this, he probably caught a lot of flack. I wonder if that had a lot to do with him just leaving.
But then that gets into the question of why were some of the hijackers trained at U.S. military bases? Why are there...
Here we go. There it is. All right. No, there were similar Arab names. Now, some Arab names are very common, like Abdul Aziz, right? There's this BBC article. It was written days after 9/11. Hijackers still alive. It shows a picture of Walid El-Shadi's face on the cover. And fringe conspiracy theorists love to point to this fact, say, hey, you see, the hijackers are still alive. No, what happened was you had Arabic people who had similar names to the hijackers. For example, Abdulaziz Al-Amari is a hijacker that allegedly was taking part in the hijacking of American Airlines 11. It crashed into the North Tower. But the person that was in the BBC article was Abdulaziz Rahman Al-Amari, who was actually a pilot in Saudi Arabia. Notice the difference. Abdulaziz Rahman Al-Amari, not Abdul Aziz Al-Amari. Similar sounding names. That's not the only one. You have Walid El-Shadi, who basically said that I'm still alive, and I think later on, the actual Walid and Wael El-Shadi, the brothers, who were from Saudi Arabia, their mother and father both gave interviews with the media saying that they haven't seen their son since they left for Afghanistan in 2000. And that they didn't deny that they were probably part of 9/11 attacks. And on September 27, 2001, the FBI finally released those photos. That's when a lot of these families said, yeah, you know, that's my son, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. So the BBC article basically brought out a lot of ignorance on the matter, because a lot of people were saying, oh, these hijackers are still alive. Think about it. If the hijackers are still alive, How is it that no media on the face of the earth has ever interviewed them? How come nobody in the truth movement ever interviewed them?
Ties between the Pakistani ISI, the American CIA, and Muhammad Atta.
Excuse me, sorry about that.
It's all right.
Who's there?
Just
Okay, sorry about that. It's
It's all good,
okay.
don't worry about it.
Okay.
okay, still running.
If you want to go back to
That's
it's
cool.
Al-Qaeda. then-
That's cool.
yeah.
I don't doubt that Al Qaeda had a degree of involvement in what happened. I also don't doubt that the hijackers existed. But when you start to look into the hijackers, who they were, where they came from, you find out that some of them might have trained at U.S. military bases. You find out that there are ties between Muhammad Atta, the lead hijacker, the Pakistani Inter-Services Intelligence Agency, the ISI, and the American Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, all focused around a $100,000 wire transfer that was wired from the head of the Pakistani ISI to Muhammad Atta. This wire transfer has not only been
A little bit of story about that because he won't tell you. Now, not that he doesn't know or know, I'll just fill you in on it. The Director General of the ISI, Mahmoud Ahmed, who retired in 2002, by the way, no, I'm sorry, 2001, incidentally, week after 9/11, mysteriously just retired. Anyway, he had wired not money directly to Muhammad Atta. He actually gave it to an intermediary who is known to the ISI as a known Arabic terrorist who has ties to a number of hostage kidnappings of hostages, British and American tourists. I'm sorry, British tourists. Was involved with the hijacking, involved with the release of a hijacking of a plane in the Millennium Plot by this Pakistani group that wanted to free this individual named Omar Saeed Sheikh. And the reason why the ISI is connected to him because, as per The Guardian, later on basically outed the story that Omar Saeed Sheikh was also trained by the ISI. So, and I think the reason why they trained him was because so they can conduct terrorist attacks against Indians for control of Kashmir. But like all Frankenstein monsters, sometimes they come and bite the owner in the rear. So Mahmoud Ahmed had given this money to Omar Saeed Sheikh. It's alleged that Sheikh had wired it to Muhammad Atta. And then that the 9/11 Commission knew about it. What was done about it? Nothing.
and denied, but has been censored from White House transcripts. When a reporter asked Condoleezza Rice about it in May 2002, any information relating to the ISI chief is simply left out. All the other transcripts about that, all the other transcripts from that press conference, put in all the ISI stuff. You know, what the White House did is they made it seem like, oh, we couldn't hear ISI chief, you know, because they just left it. You know, the reporter's question says, "Are you aware of the reports at the time that ISI chief was in Washington?" In all the White House transcripts, ISI chief is just left out, like they couldn't hear it. So that's fishy to me. But getting back to Al Qaeda and their involvement, you know, the tapes we've gotten of Osama bin Laden, we've barely ever gotten the original audio track. It's been next to impossible to verify the chain of command of where they came from. The infamous bin Laden video that was broadcast in December 2001, it's a Department of Defense translation. We have to take them on their word. There's also international establishments, a German TV station, Das Erst. Well, yeah, a German television channel, Das Erst. They have a program on there called Monitor. And right after the bin Laden tape came out in the United States, they had a bunch of Arabic translators on there saying, well, we've listened to what original audio we can get our hands on, and to us, the White House's translation of that is very problematic. They pretty much put in things where they wanted to hear them. Like, they pretty much just...
By the way, I'm glad he brought this up, actually. Der Spiegel, which is also a German publication, actually reported on probably a mistranslation of that tape and to the, you know, more fantastical believers in the truth movement. They say, oh, the tape is fake and Bin Laden's fat and stuff. It's the video calibration. In the video is Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, Suleiman Abu Ghaith, and Osama bin Laden. And the real conspiracy is the translation in the video, not that the individuals are false. If they're fake, why didn't any of them come out and say, hey, by the way, that's not us in the video? Because that video went global. It was known. It was played on C-SPAN. It was played on national media. Not the whole thing, but for years. So
Put in
maybe
whatever
we got
they
it right
wanted
here.
in there. And again, this is not according to me. This is according to Arabic professors that are very well renowned overseas.
But having said that, weren't the tapes originally sent to Al Jazeera, which is an Arabic channel anyway?
Of course, absolutely. Yeah, I don't doubt that. But I'm saying when that tape, well, the December Bin Laden tape was allegedly found by. They said it was when they were going through homes in Afghanistan. I don't know if it was Army, Special Forces, whatever. But it was the U.S. government that was responsible for that tape, was responsible for it coming to the light. When it comes to other ones, the 2004 video, the 2007 video that just came out, those are questionable as well because we don't know where it's filmed. We don't have any. We really don't have any chain of custody other than, oh, we've got this new Bin Laden tape. And then you've got the 2004 and the 2007 video, which look eerily identical. I mean, the shots are the same. Bin Laden isn't the same. There are some minor differences. Obviously, his beard is a lot darker. I just have a serious problem with anything the U.S. government gives to us without some kind of chain of custody or some kind of explanation where it came from. And certainly when they're not transparent about what's being said on the tape. When they're giving us well, I mean, I understand that they gave us a translation, but it's another thing to give us a translation without the original audio to verify it.
And can you tell me exactly what your theory is with Flight 93, of course, the flight that never did crash into a building?
Flight 93 is very interesting. I've gone there. I've talked to a lot of locals there. I talked to Barry Lichty, who is the mayor of Indian Lake, which, as you know, is the lake that's 2 miles to the southeast. I'll actually go into that. I talked to the mayor of Indian Lake, Barry Lichty, and he said that he was in his home on the morning of 9/11. Him and his wife were watching TV, and the sequence of events is their power went out, they heard an explosion, their house shook, and when Barry and his wife got up, to go inspect what happened, something flew over their house. And the words that came out of Barry's mouth was, "It sounded like a missile flew over our house. They were going that fast." He swears to this day it happened immediately after Flight 93 crashed. He swears that there's no way it was Flight 93. And it can't have been Flight 93, because Flight 93 was up here, and Barry's house was down here. And Flight 93 was traveling in this direction. So, if it crashed, and he heard the explosion of the crash, and a plane flew over this way, it had to have been something coming from the same direction as Flight 93. Barry maintained that he feels that it was not shot down, but he maintains that there was definitely a military aircraft in the air when it crashed.
Okay, let's talk about that. First of all, there was a plane nearby. There was a C-130 plane. It was driven by Stephen O'Brien, and it was told by air traffic control to follow because he was nearby Washington, D.C., who tracked Flight 77. And when he was going back to his base, he was passing Pennsylvania, and there he saw 93. Now, there was also another plane. This was a passenger plane, and it was a white one, and I forgot the guy's name. And air traffic control, actually, it's on ATC recording, and basically said, "Sir, do you see a commercial airline?" They wanted to know specifically where it was, and he said yes. And it was a Learjet that he was driving. I forgot. It's a white plane, and he was nearby Flight 93. Now, also heading to Cleveland was Air National Guard that was trying to intercept the jet, and they didn't go hot guns, which means planes with weapons on them. And one of the pilots' names is Daniel O'Brien, and she basically gave an interview to a number of publications, said that if need be, her and her partner who flew out of Otis, I think, they were going to clip 93. One was going to clip the back of the plane, and one was going to clip a wing. And they were going to basically shoot out of the airplane while the planes crashed. And that's what they were going to do. But Flight 93 had crashed into Somerset County, Shanksville, before they even got there. But those planes that this guy, Barry Lichty, heard were most likely that white, either that passenger Learjet. I don't know if it's a Learjet, but it was a passenger jet, or the C-130 that was driven by Stephen O'Brien.
That being said, you read the 9/11 Commission report, and they say that not only were there absolutely no planes in the area that morning, but the military wasn't even aware of Flight 93 until 10:07. I told this to Barry, and he couldn't believe it. He's like, well, my wife and I, we know what we heard. We have no reason to lie. We were there that morning, and we explicitly remember what happened. If a fighter jet flew over my house that morning, I'd probably remember it very vividly, too. That being said, there are a lot of aspects of the Shanksville crash that don't make sense. If you look at any other commercial airliner crash, and believe me, I've gone through hundreds of them, there is no historical precedent for a complete...
Okay, I know where he's going with this. So Dylan, if you're going to compare plane crashes, that's disingenuous, right? Because other plane crashes are where the pilot is not trying to crash at a high rate of speed, fully loaded with kerosene. Usually what happens in a plane crash, general plane crash, which is rare, by the way, the pilot will dump the fuel first and then try to land safely on the belly at the lowest speeds possible. Possibly like in the movie Sully, that where he landed in Hudson, where they try to land in an open field or in a grassy, like a landscape with a lot of land and less residential neighborhoods. And in the very, very rare instances where the pilot is intentionally crashing the plane, you're not going to find much of the plane or people. And you already had, at that point, an instance where you could have went back and said, this looked like the Shanksville crash site. And that was PSA 1771. When that plane was going 700 miles an hour, breaking the sound barrier. And if you look at the plane debris, you won't see a wing, you won't see an engine, you won't see much of anything besides paper. Large pieces of the plane were exploded into smithereens, just like Shanksville. Shanksville was going, I think, 510, 520 miles an hour. Or no, I'm sorry, 563. I think that was the fastest of all four of them. That's right, they were the fastest. And it was a plane from New Jersey to San Francisco, fully loaded. There ain't going to be much of an engine or a wing or a human body. Very little plane debris. That is the difference between an intentional plane crash site and an unintentional plane crash site. And I can understand how you could basically say, well, that didn't look like a plane crash site. But when you study how intentional and unintentional crash sites in the aftermath thereof, you'll be like, now it's understandable.
There's no historical precedent for a commercial airliner, especially a 757, crashing into soft dirt, or really any surface, and I don't want to say disappearing, but that is essentially what happened to Flight 93. You see a crater.
By the way, they found more of Flight 93 than any of the other plane crash sites. They found 95% approximately. They found the cockpit voice recorder, the flight data recorder. They found parts of both of the engines, a lot of the fuselage in the woods. Yeah, that's what they found.
Wreckage. You do see the imprint of a plane, but that's all you see. And I've got helicopter shots that zoomed in all the way into the crater, and it's not like the crater goes in and keeps going down. I mean, the crater
No,
comes in
you don't have helicopter shots going all the way in the crater. There's no shots like that.
and comes to a... It stops about 5 to 10 feet in. You can visibly see where the dirt ends. And I'm sorry, but there's nothing there. I mean, there's some scraps of metal
Right.
here and
It
there,
wouldn't
and there's
be.
some white smoke, and that's it.
Wouldn't be.
And to me, that is just, it's hard to believe. It's very hard for me to believe that an intact Boeing 757 crashed in that field.
I understand your incredulity, but your incredulity is not evidence to the contrary. If you were to make it known about PSA 1771, or now as of recent, 8 years later, we had German wings 9525, which crashed in the Alps. One was a mountainside, one was a field, just like Shanksville. There wasn't much of a plane left. I tried to show this to Jason Burmis. He called me a troll. You just don't like being wrong.
All the first responders who were there said the same thing. They said to the firefighters, "Are you sure we're at the right place?" You know, it just came straight out of their mouths.
Right,
I couldn't
and
believe
that's
the plane crashed
listen. That's
I
going to
can't
be a
either.
common response. Like they're not used to going to a plane crash site, and of course they're probably watching TV, you know, seeing remnants of what a real plane crash site looks like with a plane that's trying to land. How many times have they ever seen an intentional plane crash site? Probably not many. That's why they're puzzled. Like where's the plane? Because they're used to seeing like a plane trying to land, and you see a whole, you know, cabin, wings, and all that. But that wasn't the case here. So yes, their ignorance regarding an intentional plane crash site is warranted here.
And what would you think has happened to the passengers then? Do you think the plane actually did crash?
You see, that would delve into the area of speculation, and that is
You
the
already did. You already did. Your whole film is based on speculation. The basis of your film is that the planes weren't hijacked, but we don't know what happened to them. We think they landed in Cleveland. What else? Dylan, come on, brother.
problem when you deal with material like this. You're almost forced to speculate to a degree. All I can say about the passengers is that they did die a horrible death, and none of them deserve what happened to them. But I feel that the United States government I feel that the U.S. government has been anything but transparent, not only with the American public,
I
but
agree.
with Flight 93's relatives. They asked numerous times, can we listen to the cockpit voice recorder? Can we hear the last moments of our husbands, our wives?
They played that audio of Flight 93 at the Zacharias Moussaoui trial in 2006. You know that. Or maybe you don't. They played the cockpit voice, no, they played the phone call of Betty Ong at the 9/11 Commission. For the first time, after the effects of after the aftermath of 9/11, that was the first time ever that we heard a recording inside the planes. And it was played before the family members of Betty Ong and her brother Harry Ong and the mother, forgot her mother's name, excuse me there. They were inside the 9/11 Commission courtroom, were in the podium, and they heard the recording. That was 2003.
Our sons, can we hear the last moments of their life? FBI dragged their feet. You know, I said, no, can't do it. National security. You know, which is
That's not true. What you're just saying right now is not true. They played the recording for the families at the Zacharias Moussaoui trial of 2006, Flight 93, cockpit voice recording, and the phone calls, by the way, on top of it. They heard it. Family members heard it.
For any other time that there has been an airplane crash related to terrorism, the FBI has released the cockpit voice recorder. You know, it took them.
We don't have the cockpit voice recorder of 11, 175, or 77. We only have it for 93. That's it, and they played it.
Some time. but they did release it. And the FBI told the family members, no, we're not going to release it at all. They had to fight for it. And eventually they could listen to it, but they had to go and listen to it in a private room. They had to listen to it through headphones, and they couldn't take notes. And not only that, after Zacharias Moussaouy's sentencing
there
in
we go.
2004, in 2006...
Well, then what are you talking about before? Like they couldn't hear it. They heard it. They heard it.
After Zacharias Moussaouy's sentencing in 2006, Flight 93's... the victims of Flight 93's family members went through the transcript and said, wait a minute, this isn't the same tape we listened to. You know, there's things in here that weren't in the one we listened to, and there's things that we heard that were cut out. So that's suspicious to me. You know, I think that's the bottom line of this whole thing, is that people try to paint it like I'm the only person saying this, I'm some lone nut, I'm some stupid conspiracy theorist living in my parents' basement. I haven't lived with my parents since I was 16, you know? You know, I saw a lot of people asking questions, and I just joined them.
I think where you went wrong is that you were in a rush to appease a lot of people, and that was the demanding people in the 9/11 Truth Movement. And you were young, impressionable. You wanted to make an impression, and you certainly did. You were hot commodities back then, huge, global. You had interviews, CBS, Associated Press. You were all over the place, and it got to your heads. And then after a while, you got a lot of critics, and those critics were basically warranted regarding your film. So you made revisions. And who helped you in your revisions? The worst person possible, Alex Jones. And you also had David Ray Griffin and God knows who else helping you. And that was the end of you. Because what you did was basically say that these planes were not hijacked, not really, and that the hijackers, some of them, are still alive, and that there was no real plane crash at the Pentagon in Shanksville, and that the planes used at the World Trade Center were probably drones. The phone calls were probably fake. And behind it is the White House Bush faction. The entire premise of your film was based on your rush to appease the fantastical elements of the truth movement. And that's where you went wrong. I don't say that you did this intentionally. I don't think that was the case at all. But certainly you didn't do yourself any favors by not detaching yourself. And or no, you know what you should have done was basically say, hey, listen, we got it wrong. Planes were hijacked. And those hijacked planes did crash where they crashed. And I think the reason why you couldn't do it was because you're so far in the truth movement, the fantastical parts, elements anyway, that by doing so, they would basically vilify you and call you a shill and say you are sellouts. Well, they do it anyway. And I think this is the reason why you, Dylan Avery, don't want nothing to do with the truth movement anymore. For one, it's 21 years later, and you're on other projects, and you hate being associated with loose change. And I think you, out of the three, especially, have conflicts in your head where, you know what? We probably got it wrong. I can't say it publicly.
That's pretty much what it came down to. And there are a lot of family members and a lot of survivors asking the same questions now. It took them a couple years, but they've warmed up to it. And they're furious. Bob McIlvaine, Bill Doyle, Jersey Girls, all kinds of people, all kinds of...
Bob McIlvaine now doesn't believe a plane even hit the Pentagon. That's what the elements of the fringe conspiracy theorists did to him over the years. That's what they did to him. And he's friends with Richard Gage, so what does that tell you?
Organizations dedicated to still, 6 years after the fact, fighting for answers to their questions, and the government and the media are dragging their feet and refusing to talk to them. Sibel Edmonds, She's an FBI translator who has publicly said the U.S. government, and I'm sorry, Sibel Edmonds, an FBI translator, has said numerous times, the American people do not know the true perpetrators of 9/11. And she said that if the information that she uncovered during her duties was actually brought to light, there would be serious, high-level indictments in this country. Sibel Edmonds is now the most gagged woman in history. John Ashcroft used the state secrets privilege to pretty much shut her up. It's an act that I believe...
I got one better. Former senior executive of the NSA, Thomas Drake, probably in my lifetime, the most important whistleblower since Daniel Ellsberg of the Pentagon Papers, said this, that the NSA had so much metadata regarding the 9/11 operators, the hijackers, that if shared with anybody outside of the agency, could have prevented 9/11 alone, them alone, outside of any agency or organization. That's not me saying it. That's Thomas Drake saying. Michael Scheuer, who is chief of station of the Bin Laden issue unit, codenamed Alex Station, once said that the NSA was the gold standard in regards to signals intelligence. Why? Because they were tapping Bin Laden's satellite phone, allegedly from 1992 all the way to 1998 when he stopped using it. Other Al-Qaeda operatives were using satellite phones as well. Those were tapped. From that phone, they got a number out of Yemen, which was owned by a house, whose house was owned by an associate of Bin Laden from the Soviet-Afghan war days, named Ahmed al-Hada. This house became the Al-Qaeda communications hub. Living there, also, at times, was none other than Khalid al-Mihdhar, who was allegedly one of the hijackers of Flight 77, which crashed into the Pentagon. And they were listening to the phone calls from that house from 1996 to 2002. Imagine the amount of data these guys collected and never shared with anybody. And when the congressional inquiries from the 9/11 Commission and the Joint House Inquiry had their chance, what did they ask Michael Hayden? Barely anything, because the CIA fell on the sword for them. Why? Because the agency that was running the Bin Laden issue unit, the agency that was running the Yemen hub in Sana'a, Yemen, was the CIA. And they were doing human intelligence, and they had a bug in the house, but they didn't have a bug in the phone, so they could only listen to half. Now even if with that amount of data, can you imagine how much data that they compiled regarding 9/11, 98 East Africa bombings, USS Cole bombing? We don't know, because it's classified. I don't hear anybody ever talking about this besides people like Kevin Fenton, Paul Thompson, Peter Dale Scott, Ben Howard, Ray Nowolski, John Duffy. Those are the prominent authors, the real authorities of 9/11. Talk about this issue. It is the deal breaker for 9/11, right there. And thankfully, we got some, youth on our side, people like Sean Russell and Darren Harvey, podcast for New American Century. Those guys are young, and they're talking about it. Thank goodness for them. But hardly anyone in the global community, nobody in the media is going to talk about it. Nobody from the government is going to talk about it. How come you're not talking about it, Dylan? Or do you know anything about it? Because The conspiracy is this. Either they were talking about the 9/11 operation before it happened, or they weren't. If they were, that means the intelligence agencies probably knew about it. That means they did nothing to prevent it. Heck, you could even argue they allowed it to happen with lax security and manipulated the operation. That's a rational speculation. Two, they weren't talking about the 9/11 operation, then that means who the hell are these guys? It still would mean that the federal government and maybe foreign intelligence, as well as domestic, were involved in facilitating the operation. So either way, we have rational speculation that will happen. It's all about information. Information is power. That's why I did a video today about it. Information is power. The most powerful agencies on this earth are who? The banking industry? The fossil fuel industry? The Pentagon? No. It's the intelligence industry. Why do you think Epstein is dead? Intelligence, blackmail, power. To know about something before it happens, to know about the darkest secrets of an individual. That's how you can get blackmail. That's how you can manipulate operations, maybe for foreign policy guidelines to come true or to take advantage and implement or subvert the Constitution or somebody's civil liberties. There's a lot at stake with 9/11. All this stuff about no planes and living hijackers, nonsense. The deal breaker with 9/11 is pre-intelligence 9/11. NSA, CIA, Israelis, Saudis. That right there is 9/11. Intelligence.
Hadn't been used since the early 1900s. I don't know for a fact, but it's a very rarely invoked privilege, and John Ashcroft slapped Sibel Edmonds with it. If you guys want a story, get Sibel Edmonds in here. Ask her what she's got to say. She's offering. She's like, I've been told to shut up. I've been told that I could lose everything that I have if I open my mouth. And she's like, I'm now ready to...
I didn't even mention Abel Danger. Anthony Schaefer, Eric Kleinsmith, Dr. Eileen Presser, and a couple of others, forget their names. Defense Intelligence Agency created Abel Danger, which was a metadata mining project about terrorist operatives inside the United States. And when they uncovered a couple of cells, one led by Mohammed Atta, the other led by Omar Abdel Rahman. That's Landmark's plot, 1993 World Trade Center bombing. What did the lawyers over at the Department of the Army tell members of Abel Danger to do? Destroy the data. 3.5 terabytes. 1999, we're talking about. That's a defense intelligence agency. Why were they ordered to destroy that data? What they uncovered was that there were cells inside the United States. If shared with the FBI, if shared with anybody else, maybe could have prevented 9/11. Just like the NSA, just like the CIA. God only knows what the Saudis and Israelis know, because they were the ones personally following them here in the States. But no, let's talk about how a third building fell.
open my mouth. So she's calling on the main. She's literally calling out the mainstream media. She's saying, "Listen, I have information that can prove the official story is false." She's an FBI translator. She was there when it happened. She had to go through tons of messages. She knows what she's talking about. And the fact that the mainstream media, to this day, she offered this challenge almost a month ago now. The fact that nobody has picked up on it. The fact that I haven't seen her on CNN, Fox, ABC, CBS, CNN. I haven't seen her on any of those networks. Even to do a hit piece on her. They refuse. They refuse to even get her on camera. And to me, that speaks volumes. Because they'll rush to interview someone like me and paint me out to be some stupid kid with a computer. But an FBI translator who was there, who knows what...
Right. Do you not see why they interviewed you and Kevin Barrett and Morgan Reynolds? Is because you guys put in the fantastical. And then what the media does is say, aha, you see, anybody who questions that 9/11 was an inside job and that the American government's in it, they're all going to be painted like you. Made to look like an irresponsible conspiracy theorist, somebody who falsely accuses the government of a false crime, such as no planes, living hijackers. And the public will see this and say, oh, the 9/11 truth movement, they're all like that? Well, they know, right? They don't know much about 9/11 truth movement in general. So they're just going to paint you. And that's what the media, all the media doesn't do anything. They just interview you. Oh, yeah, here you go. Well, you think some of the hijackers are alive? Oh, the planes weren't real? Well, they were holograms. It's exactly what they want. They want to paint all of us, even the rational people, made to look as irresponsible and fantastical as you. And they succeeded. And now, I'm trying to repair the damage as pitiful as I can. I'm not a major player. I'm barely a blip on the radar. I'm trying to bring actual content that people can use and learn from. Try and subvert the damage that you caused.
happened, who has information that can literally blow the entire story wide open, they refuse to get her on camera. Why is that?
Now, as a member of the media over here in the UK, of course, we have the inquest on Princess Diana, and the conspiracy theory as well that Diana's death was not an accident. With this as well, isn't there a case for arguing, though, that sometimes terrible things do happen, and there's an inability for people nowadays to accept that really tragic accidents do happen, or tragic acts of terrorism? You know, that there just isn't room for an act of God, as it were.
Of course. But I don't doubt for a second that 9/11 was a terrible tragedy. I accept perfectly why it happened. I have no delusions about what happened on that day. And, I have to look at the evidence, and I have to look at what's out there. I can't take the government on their word when they say
you didn't do that. Your first mistake was this. This is what you did. 9/11 was an inside job. Imagine a crime scene investigator goes to a crime scene and says, oh, I know what didn't happen here, before he even looks at anything else, any evidence whatsoever. Oh, I know what didn't happen here. Imagine that. They would think, oh, this guy's corrupt. You can't just make up a hypothesis and only look at evidence that agrees with it. That's not how this works.
just Al-Qaeda, go back to bed. When I look at the numerous war games that were going on that day, when I look at the backgrounds of the hijackers, when I look at all of these things, there's literally almost mountains of evidence that points towards there being an alternative explanation, whatever that alternative explanation may be. People say things like, these people get off on believing this. They love thinking that their government would do this. They have to find alternate explanations for situations which have a very simple explanation. Muslims did it, for example. I wish it was that simple. I wish I could wake up and say, well, you know what? 9/11 was done by 19 Arabs. That's it. I can go back to bed. American Idol's on. I can't do it. I absolutely refuse to. People are going to call me names.
And then you made a film, basically, that was more of an irrational storyline than the official report. In fact, the 9/11 Commission report, which was basically an incomplete report, made a lot more sense than your film. In fact, I can even say that the 9/11 Commission report answered more questions than your film did. What did your film answer anything? Your entire film of Loose Change was based on speculation, the majority of the film.
Insinuate that I'm crazy. They're going to insinuate that I think this because I want to. I would love nothing more than to be proven wrong.
No, you don't. Maybe you do. Maybe you do. Jace Burma certainly does not. He's proven that already. And Corey Rowe, off the radar. So, yeah, this is the reason why you don't touch the film anymore and don't like to be associated with it.
I would love nothing more for that. But until you can prove to me that there was no ties between the ISI and Muhammad Atta, until you can prove to me that Sibel Edmonds is a crackpot and she has no idea what she's talking about, the hijackers weren't trained at military bases, the war games weren't going on that morning. If you can prove to me all of that is false, I will shake your hand and thank you. I'd love to. I'd love to turn my back on this and know for a fact what actually happened. And I can't. I can't, the family members can't, the survivors can't. None of us are going to.
So your film really is it's theories and speculation. It's not definite, and
No,
I think you want to say
absolutely
that, you know, in that you don't definitely know what happened, and that you're just putting forward these
No,
these
absolutely
theories,
not.
some of which are very, very credible and very well backed up, has to be said as well.
They're not all theories. In fact, we've almost cut speculation and theory out of the final cut completely. It's all fact.
Wow. The final cut, maybe, but not the first edition.
Everything we bring up in this.
But yeah, let's harp on that a little bit. You didn't step back and say, hey, wait a minute. We were wrong about the Pentagon shanks. We were dead wrong. You didn't do that. And a little bit of the specifics in the final cut, it will modify it, right? But the bigger issues you didn't back down from.
This movie is a fact. It's not speculation.
And leaving the
Yeah,
audience.
it is. Even in the final cut, it was based on speculation. Yes, it was.
To draw their own conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
Are you pleased with how it's gone? Because of course it was an internet release at first, and now it should be coming to cinemas next year.
That's what
It's
we're
on
hoping.
DVD. Yeah, you must be pleased though that a lot of people have been watching this. For goodness' sake, the amount of hits that you are having on the internet as well.
I am pleased, but you know, a lot of it is people watching it over and over again. A lot of it is preaching to the choir, as it were. The mainstream media and the U.S. government, anyone, there has yet to be a serious, impartial, bipartisan investigation into
I agree.
9/11. The investigation took 441 days to get off the ground in the first place. So, I don't know. Yeah.
Talk about how the movement is now mainstream.
Yeah.
How patriots for 9/11 truth are over 500 physicists, engineers.
That's the other thing, is that, you know, I stress, I am not the only person saying this. I am far from that. You've got retired CIA analysts. One of them is in our film. Ray McGovern worked for the CIA for 27 years, knows what he's talking about. You've got people who worked on the 9/11 Commission who have called it into question. You've got people who have worked within the government. And as Tim just said, patriotsquestion911.com. You go there, you'll see military intelligence officials, FBI officials, family members, survivors. You'll see a list of hundreds of people, some of them incredibly credible, some of them ordinary people, all of them saying the same thing. We need a new investigation into what happened. We absolutely need to. They are irrefutable facts.
How do you get a new investigation? How do you do that? Who is in control of the information? The federal government. Unless you are going to entrust the federal government to some extent, you're not getting any investigation whatsoever. Because either those files are locked away in the National Archives for 30, 40 years, or you have to go to the alphabet agencies who you don't trust to begin with. You know, I posed a question to a no-planer once. I'm not going to say his name, but I basically said, you know, if the Pentagon came out and showed that there was a clear plane in the view of the camera or whatever camera there was, would you believe it? He probably said, probably not. See, and this is the reason why, is because they don't want to turn around and say, hey, we were wrong all these years. And then now we have to do real work, investigate who these hijackers are, you know, who was following these people, what did they know, what they didn't know, who was financing these people. It's a lot of work. It's much easier to just say, hey, hijackers don't exist. But when you do that, that means all the alphabet agencies, foreign and domestic, you absolve. Because, for example, there were no hijackers on Flight 77. Flight 77 didn't crash the Pentagon. That means you have basically absolved the following. One, the bin Laden issue station withholding information about Khalid al-Bernard and Nawaf al-Hazmi coming from a terrorist summit meeting in Malaysia to the United States with U.S. visas. Two, the Saudis who are financing Khalid al-Bernard and Nawaf al-Hazmi, who had connections to the former U.S. Saudi ambassador to the United States, Bandar bin Sultan, who was giving money to his wife, who was giving money to the wife of a terrorist sympathizer, to the hijackers. All of that is gone. I'm not even going to mention the Hamburg cell and the Israelis that were monitoring them. If you don't believe that they were involved, guess what? All that is gone too. Now, who do you blame? There's your problem.
Not theory, not speculation, irrefutable facts about 9/11 that need to be addressed, that need to be answered and cleared up. And until then,
You're not asking the right questions. I mean, you're close, but you're not there, right? And this is 2007, I know, but the answers were there in 2007. There was a lot of answers, not more than now, but there were enough answers there. And you could have read this Connecting the Dots by Kevin Fenton. You could have read The Terror Timeline by Paul Thompson. John Gold was around with his website. I mean, he's been there since, the 1700s, that guy. All right. There was reputable people back then. I mean, you had Citizens for 9/11, 9/11 Citizens Watch, run by Kyle Hentz and John Judge. Could have went with them. No. You went with Alex Jones.
and these questions aren't going to go away. The family members aren't going to be happy. No one's going to be happy.
I suppose that what has happened, though, is 9/11 has changed the course of modern history.
Yes.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt about that.
Well, and that brings me back to your question. Why would they do this? Well, it's been pretty successful so far. They've gotten everything they've wanted out of it.
Although a very, very bad situation in Iraq, they haven't succeeded there.
They didn't want to succeed.
What do you think they wanted?
They didn't go over to Iraq to remove Saddam Hussein from power and bring freedom and democracy to the Iraqi people. They had an agenda. They absolutely had an agenda. And I, for one, feel it's going according to plan. I don't know what it is. I wasn't there. I don't know what these...
What was the agenda? My God's sakes. The Paul Wolfowitz Doctrine. Oded Yinon. Project for New American Century. And then later on, you had the Bush Doctrine, which is basically an extension of PNAC and the Wolfowitz Doctrine. This was a State Department war with the neocons behind it. This was an Israeli war. And this was a Gulf war. The Saudis, Arabs, not the Persians, not the Pashtuns, the Khazars. These countries and intelligence agencies may have had minor differences, but the ultimate goal is the same: to destroy the competing Arab League who are not in line with Western interests or the interests of Israel and Saudi Arabia. Most of these countries are Shia countries or Sunni countries with a large Shia minority. Syria, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Iran. Nobody's calling for war against Saudi Arabia. No one's calling for war against Pakistan. No one's calling for war for the United Arab Emirates or Qatar. We all had a part to play in where the hijackers came out from and commiserated where the ideology came from to help facilitate these groups like Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, Abu Sayyaf, or Jemaah Islamiyah.
People think, but I don't think that Iraq was just some cock-up. And that's another argument people throw in our faces. These guys couldn't have orchestrated 9/11. Look at Iraq and look at Hurricane Katrina. Well, Hurricane Katrina, they didn't care, okay? It's not like they were scrambling to get FEMA to New Orleans, okay? It's not like 9/11 where we were scrambling to get fighter jets into the air. These guys had days. Bush had a warning. Bush had a very clear-cut warning what was about to happen in New Orleans, and he ignored it. It's on video. I don't see how that's incompetence. That is, to me, is arrogance and is criminal. It's manslaughter. It's willing manslaughter, and it's on video. You can fucking prove it.
What's just back to 9/11? The just one more question. Obviously, is that you've named the two people you think that you'd really like to see indicted, and sort of you said that you didn't think Bush knew about it. Whoever, should some of your theories be proved positive in the future, then that really makes them some of the most evil people in history to have done this and to have so much blood on their hands.
They are the most evil people in history. There's no question about that. No question. The sitting administration in the United States will inevitably go down as probably the evilest ever. I can't imagine an administration worse than these people. I can't. I mean, and they've been players in the industry for a long time. Cheney and Rumsfeld, I mean, they're no strangers to United States government, how it works, and how you can control the masses. They're no strangers to that. And the fact that these people keep popping up in history and keep coming back, the fact that our elections went Bush,
Obama came
Bush,
close,
and, maybe Clinton again, speaks volumes to me. We don't have a fair electoral process anymore. We don't. Our country is totally screwed. And again, I mean, did the Bush administration simply get lucky? I mean, did they just stumble into office and this terrorist attack happened and they could do whatever they wanted? Or is there a much bigger global agenda going on? As to who pulls the strings, as to who controls it, I don't know. Again, it's theory and speculation. I don't think Bush did 9/11, and I don't think the Bush administration alone did 9/11. But, as I said, I feel that there are people in the administration who have a very good idea what happened. And as I said, Cheney is the closest. If there's one person in that administration that has a clue about what happened, it's Cheney. It's no question. But I mean, you look at Bush's face that morning.
You're assuming that even. You're assuming that. And even I wouldn't say that. In fact, I don't think anybody in the Bush administration had any idea about the specifics. You want to talk about specifics? Yeah, I'll give you a name. Michael Hayden, the director of the NSA. George Tenet, the DCI, the CIA. And I don't know who are the handlers of the Israelis and the Saudis in this country, but maybe Bandar bin Sultan, maybe Benjamin Netanyahu, maybe. Remember, there's a word. It's called plausible deniability. Very few people, very few, will know about most of what happened. And a little bit of information to their superiors or to the underlings, but not enough to implicate. Okay? Those in the intimate knowledge, well, that would be who? The intelligence services. Who is in charge of the wiretaps of bin Laden's satellite phone? Who is in charge of listening to the recordings or read the transcripts of the Al Qaeda communications hub? Who is in charge of taking notes or listening to phone calls when it comes to the Israelis and Saudis monitoring the Al Qaeda subjects and their affiliates inside the United States? Who? We won't know. They deported them all.
School, when he found out what was going on, he was like, he did actually, well, he started spacing out. I mean, like, you could see when the children are reading, he's just kind of like nodding his head.
The people, the faces of the public, like Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Condoleezza, they're not going to know the intimate details because they might slip up. Plausible deniability. Learn about it. The people who's behind the scenes, and they're behind the scenes for a reason, so you don't know who they are and what they're doing. But when it comes to 9/11, we do know that we had domestic affairs agencies, signals, and human intelligence regarding the 9/11 operators inside the country. Thing is, who are they? Read the Gerald Shea memo. Read Disconnecting the Dots by Kevin Fenton. Read The Watchdogs Didn't Bark by Ray Nowolowski. Read The Terror Timeline by Paul Thompson. Watch Nelson Martin's films. Listen to the New Kids on the Block podcast for New American Century. They're bringing light to these subjects. Ryan Dawson's still around, but he's in like the nether regions of viral world. But there's some of us that are still around. Okay, we're still putting out information.
Dozing off. He's kind of thinking. And then later on, when he gets to Barksdale Air Force Base at 1 p.m., he looks like he's scared shitless. He wasn't scared at 9 in the morning. He was just rushed. You know, he had a script thrown in front of him, and he had to read it and then get on to Air Force One, fly around for a couple hours, and land at Barksdale. And when he landed at Barksdale, he looked really spooked. And I don't mean he looked spooked like a president whose nation was just under attack. He looked like somebody who just got some really bad news. And this was at 1 in the afternoon. This is hours after the towers had fallen. So, again, I don't point the finger at Bush, and I don't point the finger at the administration as a whole. I'm simply pointing at the issues that I and millions of others, many of them very well respected, have about the events of 9/11.
Yeah, and that's the end. So many more questions regarding their hypothesis of 9/11 when it comes to film Loose Change. And maybe Dylan Avery, after all these years, and this is 15 years later, that was 2007, that interview. It's 2022. You know, people could change their minds, but they have to come clean and admit that they're wrong, because that would be like if I gave a video or I did a video where I gave false information and just left it up there and say, you know what, the hell with it. Well, that would be my fault. That means that video is still up there. Somebody's watching it saying, oh, wow, is that really true? That would bother me. I try to be on point as best as I could be. I'm trying to be right 100% of the time. I'm not. And if anybody thinks I'm wrong in certain areas, I would love for them to comment in the video and say, hey, wait a minute, we're wrong about this. And I'll make the correction. Because I want my audience to come away with knowledge and information, not to just believe something. Well, that's all for this video. I will be in Washington, D.C. with Reed Coverdale and Jackman Radio, Eric Jackman, I think. Going to a Ron Paul conference. I'll be back on Sunday, and I might live stream there or something. Maybe Reed will and give a short talk about what's going on. But I'll see you in the next video. Have a good night, everybody.